This is a special presentation from UFC Fight Pass. Step into our world at UFCFightPass.com. This is Extra Rounds. Extra Rounds.
Salt Lake City, Utah has been a destination for the UFC, and tonight inside Delta Center, it saw the third successful defense of Alex Pineda's light heavyweight title, and we're here to break it down on Extra Rounds from UFC Fight Pass, presented by DraftKings Sportsbook. The crown is yours. Hey everybody, I'm TJ DeSantis. Thanks for joining us here on Extra Rounds. It's an exciting time in mixed martial arts when you have a true gem of a light heavyweight champion like we have in Alex Pineda. And speaking of gems, I've got one here joining me tonight, breaking things down with me. You know him as not John Anik, Jason Anik here as well. Jason, how are you, sir?
I can never go to sleep after these pay-per-views anyway, so happy to chop it up with you. Had a good time at the watch-along with Jens Pulver and Forrest Griffin, putting me in my place all night. But, dude, what a night, man. The big show delivers as usual.
No, absolutely. And, I felt warm and fuzzy tonight because we talk a lot about GOATs in mixed martial arts, and I feel like we do it too early. You know, we have a recency bias in mixed martial arts more often than not. But tonight, I think it was just certifiably etching it in stone, printing it in ink, that Alex Pineda is definitely one of the greatest of all time, if not knocking on the door to John Jones and maybe is firmly in that number 2 spot. He successfully gets it done tonight. It wasn't without some adversity. Khalil Roundtree was definitely game and brought the fight to the Brazilian, but ultimately Alex was able to get a stoppage in the 4th round. What do you think, Jason? I mean, am I putting the cart before the horse too much, saying that Alex might be, goated here? What do you think?
So I love you. I hate greatest of all time conversations, but I'm glad you went here because I actually brought it up on the watch along, right? It's like Chael Sonnen said, I believe on a show earlier this week, that one more win out of Poatan and he's the greatest of all time. And we sort of laugh about it a little bit, but honestly, for my eyes tonight, especially given what you said with that adversity, Roundtree Jr. was game. A lot of smart people had the first couple rounds for him. But dude, Poatan, man, it's like he looked unbeatable as that fight went on. I'm just blown away by this guy. Like, what's this, his 5th UFC pay-per-view? He's headlining 5 of the last 27 pay-per-views overall. I mean, dude is just a superstar, man. And like everything about him. And during the press conference earlier on Thursday night, right? Great job by Fabiano translating. But at one point he said, like, don't you see me up here? The translation was like, don't you see me up here laughing? Don't you see my charisma? And it's like, yeah, we see all of it. And I said earlier, I'm a broken record for anyone who watched the watch along. He said to Glover Teixeira this week, like, I'm finally starting to sort of figure this MMA thing out. And like, man, is he ever.
That's terrifying, by the way. If this is him just starting to figure it out, I don't know what the future will hold, because I mean this was his 10th UFC fight tonight, Jason. 10th UFC fight, and he's already, I'm like, we're not having a hyperbolic GOAT discussion here. Like, what he has done in 10 UFC fights will probably never be replicated again.
Well, it's just unbelievable. And even if you think about the loss of Adesanya, right? He had a real good chance to win that night too.
Right.
Hard for me not to want to spin it forward and think about it as sort of moving forward, right? And I dropped the name Ankalaev at the end of the watch-along party. I'm not trying to go beyond tonight, right? But when I think about a guy like Khalil Roundtree Jr., who was committed to go in there and strike, was never going to, because I'm not suggesting he's a wrestler, right? Muay Thai background, but was not going to try to maybe get it to a place that might be uncomfortable for Pereira. He was going to fight sort of his fight, his style. That was his sort of way to go about it. And if you're going up against Poatan, tough to beat him in that realm.
Yeah, no, 100%. Roundtree was a guy that when it was first announced, as a purist, I like to call myself, I thought that potentially this was a fight that didn't make sense. I like the Ankalaev matchup. It has to happen at one point or another. Rakic obviously is on the radar for Ankalaev first, but Roundtree did everything that you would want and more from a guy who was, a 6-1 underdog. Like, he wasn't supposed to win tonight, and while he didn't win, he was still very game and gave every single person who put their money down for pay-per-view or bought a ticket in Delta Center their money's worth.
No doubt about it. And you can be sure the line against Yuri Prochazka for Poatan in UFC 303 was a lot closer on paper, but
Yeah.
this fight was far more competitive. I don't have enough superlatives for Poatan, whether it's just his poise and whether or the way he manages himself in what is a 5-round setting. I'm just blown away at all the way he's sort of walking him down and then picking his spots to be aggressive with his footwork. And to have a performance on the opposing side by Roundtree be so good and still have it end up being such a good night for Pereira, just blown away.
Have we said Shama yet? Or Shama? I don't even know how to
Shama,
say Shama.
we have it. We have it.
You know, I think that's the thing that I like the most about Alex Pereira is he is, to me, he's that guy that transcends the genre. Like, combat sports is always going to be a niche sport. I love that Dana White believes this can be bigger than soccer. I would love it to be bigger than soccer. I don't know if it ever will. But there are personalities like Alex Pereira that transcends the sport itself. And, you know, I think when we have athletes like that, we don't really start to realize it until they're at the end of their run, or we have to do it sort of in hindsight. What this guy has done in 10 UFC fights is just absolutely insane. And, you know, there's going to be workplaces that are just going to be doing nothing but talking about what we saw tonight on pay-per-view. And that's what makes him so special. It makes the UFC so special when you have athletes that just go out there and you know, this is a guy that doesn't speak English, and he's one of the biggest stars in North America.
It's unbelievable. And there were moments tonight where I felt like maybe he was going to fall off the throne. And Forrest Griffin made some really interesting points tonight about Israel Adesanya and just sort of maybe being a little bit too active and sort of catching up with him. I sort of think Volkanovski perhaps a similar situation too, right? So I think people do worry, like, how far can you sort of go? How many times can you defend it where you just sort of inevitably, law of averages, someone's just going to catch you. And Khalil Roundtree Jr. was that guy in a position to maybe catch him tonight, and he didn't. Poatan, hopefully enjoy the rest of this year, you know what I mean, before he sort of defends this thing again. But I can't get enough. And I said on the watch along, and I don't mean to be repetitive, but there was a time, and I'm embarrassed to say this, that I was almost like, oh, you know, this guy's headlining again. Like, really, we got to slop Pereira out there again. But never going to say that again. Anytime you want to put this guy out there, you got my money.
Yeah, no, 100%. The question, I guess, for me moving forward, you mentioned Ankalaev. I think that fight is one that makes sense. Rogan asked him about if he wanted to move down to middleweight again. He'd talked about that potentially, but now he's, you know, tight with Sean Strickland, a guy who he absolutely decapitated in the octagon. This is a great sport. You can murk someone in the cage, and then your best friends not far removed from it. But if John Jones doesn't retire and he does beat Stipe Miocic, Jens Pulver's been pushing for a Poatan and Bones Jones fight for a while now. I would love to see that fight. I would love to see Alex move up to heavyweight.
Well, so yes, I would love to see that fight. I would love to see Alex move up to heavyweight. It's so hard for me to envision John Jones fighting beyond the Stipe Miocic fight. So in a fantasy land, sure. And when you bring up heavyweight, that is interesting. I think Jens was maybe talking about like 215 or some sort of a catchweight thing. And I do, wherever it is, I don't really care what weight class. I would certainly love to see it. But for me, they are sort of from different eras, even though their age may be similar. You know what I mean? So for me, my appetite for this is there. But my appetite for Poatan to have a challenge, and no disrespect to Alexander Rakic here, by the way, we keep dropping Ankalaev, but I have more of an appetite to see Poatan face a challenge like Ankalaev than I do sort of some super fight like John Jones, if I'm being honest.
I think that's fair. You know, obviously, there are questions about John at heavyweight. I still don't know if John can get hit by heavyweights. Cyril Gahn didn't hit him. Stipe is a bit of a live dog for me in the fact that he has power. And John, you know, was getting hit in the latter part of his run at light heavyweight. So, I mean, maybe Miocic shocks the world at Madison Square Garden. But I don't know. We'll see what happens. Bottom line is...
Honestly... I don't mean to interrupt you, but I talk about shock in the world. You're going to shock me if the fight happens. And I'm not trying to be negative, but it's like I was not that excited for it a year ago. I'm not trying, you know, like my brother would kill me, but I'm not that excited for it now. And like when they make the walk, I'll get excited.
Right. And, you know, I mean, fine. Like maybe Poatan moves up to heavyweight. John's not in the picture and we just have to see him fight Tom Aspinall. I'd be okay with that.
I hear you. I think he's going to stay in his lane.
I think so too. He should, because he has the opportunity to be the greatest light heavyweight of all time. This is the glamour division of the UFC, at least it used to be. I think 205 has fallen off a little bit, but now they're just falling over because Poetan's putting him out, and he does so again tonight. Let's talk about our co-main event. It is a new champion above the women's division there, as Raquel Pennington, on a lot of people's scorecards, did what she needed to do tonight to get her hand raised, but it was Juliana Pena who takes the fight via split decision. Jason, Anik, your thoughts on how the judges scored it over 25 minutes?
Well, obviously it's a cliche. Don't leave it in the judges' hands. And even the winner, Juliana Pena, uttered those words tonight. I think the two judges that had it for Pena had all three of the first rounds for her. I think a lot of us sort of watching and maybe not scoring thought it was 2-2 heading into the fifth and saw round 5 for Raquel Pennington. But Juliana Pena, man, and new for the second time, has a win over Amanda Nunes on her belt. It's just really impressive for me. From when you have a situation like this in a very competitive 5-round fight, and you're not sitting here as we're watching the fights breaking down the scoring. There were a lot of close fights tonight, a lot of split decisions that I felt like made sense being split decisions. So I'm happy for Juliana. I know her well. She made the trip to Manchester to support Bilal Muhammad, her teammate. He was in her corner for the first time tonight. But yeah, man, when you leave it up to the judges, it's pretty tough. But Raquel Pennington did realize a championship, right? They've both become champions. So it doesn't hurt me as much when these sort of close things happen. But yeah, when it ended, I was a little surprised.
I was surprised that Raquel was actually the favorite. I thought that just stylistically speaking, Pena had a better chance on paper to win and play her game. I also didn't like the fact that I had a conversation with Pennington over, I think it was at the Hall of Fame at IFW, and I just got like the sense that she was just very satisfied with her career, which she should be. She's a champion. But when you've checked all the boxes in your goals, like what are you fighting for anymore? You know what I mean? And that's worrisome sometimes.
Well, and worrisome maybe for a fighter that's not built like Juliana Pena, right? And if you're going to use the dark hole analogy, and if you watch the watch along, you heard me use it, you throw a couple people in dark hole. If Juliana Pena is one of them, she's coming out the hole. She's just coming out. And it's the phrase is meanness, toughness, whatever it may be, but she's so game all the time. And with 2 years off, right? 2 full years plus between fights for her, there were a lot of question marks, but she certainly looked healthy. She certainly looked game. And I thought in a lot of the adverse moments for her in the fight, she stepped up and sort of kept working. And look, these judges are in tough spots sometimes, right? So I think I'm very excited because I think there's so much juice with the matchup with Kayla Harrison. So I'm glad that this sort of stumbled the way it did, because I think that fight has so much heat.
Yeah, looking at the judges, I'm kind of conflicted on this decision a little bit, because I feel like it was razor close. Like 48-47 was pretty much a scorecard no matter how you scored it for either fighter. It was going to be 48-47. It was going to come down to one round. And you mentioned it was that first round. That was the one that the judges really differed on. And that's sort of the problem, I think, with the 10-point must system, in the sense that a lot of people sort of fall in love with what happened at the latter part of a fight when every round is scored evenly. It's 5 miniature fights over the course of 25 minutes. And if you win 4-1, it doesn't matter if you did so by basically, or if you win a split decision, it doesn't matter if it came down to that first round, if that was the deciding round. And unfortunately, we look at the first round a lot of times in championship fights, especially as these feel-out rounds, this information gathering sort of period. And, when you're kind of feeling each other out, judge is still going to put a 10 next to the winner and a 9 next to the loser of the round. And it's not a 10-10 round. People don't do 10-10 rounds really in mixed martial arts. And I think tonight, a lot of people that feel that Rocky was wronged are doing so because the judges scored a feel-out round for Juliana Pena.
Well, right. And I think some of these rounds tonight are super difficult to score, right? Yeah. And you have split decision fights that sometimes will be like, yeah, it makes sense. Yep, that round tough to score. Makes sense. That's a split decision. But for me, when I look at that, right, even if you have half a point available to you, right? How do these scorecards shake themselves out tonight? And you talk about sort of the latter part of the fight being judged, even the latter part of the round, right? One judge did have a 30-27 for Tisha Pennington in an earlier fight in the night. And that first round was almost split half and half, right? Where Tisha really did some stuff on the feet, but then Carla took her down. I definitely scored round 1 for Carla Esparza, but it was really more just sort of the taste in my mouth at the end of the round.
Yeah. I went over to my favorite website on crazy nights of judging like this, which is MMAdecisions.com. There were 26 scorecards turned in by the media for our co-main event. How many do you think Raquel Pennington got out of 26?
Oh, I'm so glad you're asking me this. I'm going to go like 16.
She got 25 of 26.
Wow.
And the other one didn't go Juliana Pena's way. One media member had it as a draw. So 26 scorecards, 25 to Pennington, one draw. That's crazy.
Wow.
That's crazy.
You know what though? I will say, bro, it was so clear. If you after round 4, it was really clear. Like we were like, yeah, 2-2. Let's go. Round 5 is who it is, right? So, but I wonder if all those media members are scoring as they go.
Yeah, that's the issue too.
You know,
like I'm sitting here, I'm getting ready for this show, I'm taking notes, but I'm not locked in to judging the fight probably the way I should be, especially in a 5-round fight. I'm not locked into that first round. Like the whole thing comes down to that first round. You know what I mean?
Right. Exactly. And like, no, thank you. You want to feel it out as a fan. Like I'm not being compensated to judge the fight, and I'm not going to do it that way. But it is interesting when you go back to the main event, right? Where Poatan, man, felt like in a different way. He came out sort of guns blazing where normally, but there were still moments for him where he was absolutely such a professional and feeling out the 5 rounds, where there were times where Khalil looked like he was putting in a lot more work than Poatan. Yeah. You know what I mean? And Poatan sort of just in control, even though I think Aaron Broadstetter and some other guys had the first 2 rounds for Khalil.
Right.
Just nuts, man. What a night.
And that's the thing too, is like there's this narrative sometimes among fans, like you gotta beat the champion to take the title, and by that I mean like it needs to be more decisive. This isn't like a game of volleyball where you need to win by like 2 points. You know what I mean?
No,
you just have to have 1 round, 1 point more. You get your hand raised. I mentioned the sort of satisfaction that Pennington had when I chatted with her earlier this summer. She seemed a bit complacent in the fight. Her corner had to sort of wake her up a little bit and yell at her. What were your thoughts on her sort of maybe slow start in the fight?
It's really interesting, right? I think that she made some mistakes in putting herself in positions that were advantageous to Juliana, right? Where she was in spots where she was in tight and she was, almost going for takedowns or going for clinch spots where that was just more favorable to Juliana. So I fault her more for not sort of keeping it super, super clean and sort of managing the distance well. Forrest Griffin thought that toward the end of that fight, she was controlling the distance masterfully. And I agree with him tremendously. So for me, it's sort of like when you think about the judges, right? Hard for me to find much fault with Raquel Pennington when I felt like she was sort of losing the fight and found a way to win the fight, if I'm being honest. So I think she sort of managed it well. And in a 5-round fight, I think sometimes, especially against someone like Juliana, maybe a little bit of a cautious approach isn't the worst thing.
Right. Now, you mentioned Juliana Pena. It is, her title. She leads this division now, and there's Kayla Harrison. We saw her tonight victorious. It was a little bit tougher for her than maybe some had thought. She was a huge favorite. She mentioned that Ketlen Vieira made her bleed, which no one has done before. Your thoughts on a potential Juliana Pena and Kayla Harrison fight?
Can't get enough of it. I know both of them well. I do a show with Bilal Muhammad. They've both been on the show. And I believe Bilal Muhammad had a bet with Kayla when Amanda Nunes fought Juliana. And Bilal was on Juliana and Kayla was on Amanda, American Top Team. They knew each other, whatever. So when Kayla lost that bet, she had to come on our show and sing karaoke, right? But there's tremendous heat. I mean, the press conference, they weren't even fighting and there was so much heat. So yeah. I can't get enough of that. I mean, but I will say, right, like Ketlen Vieira, right? How would Ketlen Vieira do? I understand I think she faced Pennington, right? But Ketlen Vieira is very, very talented mixed martial artist as well. Think about all 4 of these. But Kayla, to me, on a little bit of a different level. I'd be fascinated to see what the line will be with Kayla versus Juliana Pena. I don't think Kayla will be as big a favorite as she was tonight, but I do think she will be favored.
I think she'll still be, 3-1, 3.5 to 1 favorite, maybe even 4. Honestly, because she's been so dominant over her career. And that's, I talked about the satisfaction of Pennington, winning the title. I honestly didn't expect Kayla Harrison to come to the UFC. She seemed to be very satisfied, doing what she did prior to, this run in the octagon. And if the call never came, I think she was okay with that. But then ultimately, she found out it could be a possibility, and she sees the opportunity. And so far, so good. I'm just curious if this division is deep enough, if Kayla Harrison does beat Juliana Pena, if this division is deep enough to continue building stars, or if this is just going to be the Kayla Harrison show and she runs away with it.
Well, that's a great question, right? And I'm glad that we don't necessarily have to answer this until that next fight, right? Because this Kayla Harrison, Juliana Pena fight, with the utmost respect for Raquel Pennington, has so much more juice. So for me, seeing what happens with that, right? I find it very likely that if Kayla Harrison is able to get through Juliana Pena, that by that time, there will be someone very game sort of ready to go. But Kayla has some Ronda Rousey in her, to me, that if she is able to realize a championship, the next woman coming is going to be enough for her to be selling stuff. And I just think she's going to continue. Her star's going to continue to grow. I love her on the microphone. I think she's a natural. And I think she's sort of gotten through this weight cut that I think some of us were concerned. Maybe, some of us like you that maybe never thought she'd make the leap over. That may have been a reason perhaps why. But I always thought she was coming to the big show.
I called the fight of hers in Invicta, and that was at 45. And she had a tough time making that weight. You know what I mean? So you are right. And she's just cut from a different cloth. I mean, she's an Olympian, not only an Olympian, a gold medalist. And when you are built that way, you live for competition. And she's probably more dialed in and locked in than she's ever been before. And if you need evidence of that beyond her wins, it's simply what you mentioned, that weight cut.
Yeah, and I think she got to, when she knew she had to go to 35, she got to a different place, right? Yeah. You know what I mean? Whereas 45 was tough, and then the weight cut to 35 was probably similarly tough, but she probably was operating 10 pounds lower. Yeah. What do you think she weighed? What do you think she weighed tonight?
Oh,
making that walk?
I mean, at least
over under 55.
That's a really good number. That sounds like a ludicrous number, but that's a really good number to put the over under at. I'll say under, but I might be wrong.
Pretty close. Yeah.
Let's take a look at the odds, courtesy of our friends over at DraftKings Sportsbook. The crown is yours. This is how the odds were earlier this week when I chatted with people in our marathon preview. Alex Pedetta was minus 500. He closes tonight a little bit lower than that. Roundtree got some money coming in on him to move that line up to minus 425, and Roundtree looked a lot more game tonight. More so than a plus 330 underdog. Jose Aldo almost closed at even money. He was at minus 120 earlier in the week. He drops a split decision tonight. Jason, we've talked about a lot of split decisions. What was your thought on the Bautista and Jose Aldo fight? The decision.
Really good fight, really entertained. I thought Aldo had more pop and more power, but I thought Bautista was really game. The cardio system certainly did right by him, and I thought he just sort of kept coming. And ultimately, I thought it deserved to be a close split decision fight. It was a close fight. Hard for me not to root hard for Jose Aldo whenever I'm watching him compete. I still can't believe we're watching him compete after that Hall of Fame induction ceremony in 2023. But good for Bautista, because there's a lot that comes with this sort of stage and this opponent. And I think he was, super fast, super quick. And I thought, even though it might have been a little bit boring and people might not have loved him sort of bringing it to the fence, I think he did what he needed to do to get his hand raised. And I think that fight IQ can be underrated sometimes. I saw a lot of fighters find their path to victory tonight. And I think in space, Jose Aldo was giving him problems, and he did what he needed to do. And I think he was justifiably the winner.
Yeah, I mentioned I fancy myself a purist, and, we're coming off that, monumental Sphere show. And people were upset that Shevchenko used her wrestling. People were upset that Merab used his wrestling. It's a game. It's a tactical game. And if you don't have wrestlers that can do what people do and play that smart game, then these knockouts where strikers stay upright the entire time wouldn't be as sweet. I mean, we did have a referee earlier tonight separating these guys to make sure that no grappling was happening whatsoever. We can talk about him in a moment. But
I hear, and there are going to be levels to the enjoyment of wrestling, right?
Yeah.
My brother John has said when Bilal Muhammad was wrestling Leon Edwards, UFC 304 in Manchester, that was fun to watch. And dropping
Right.
him on his head, that's good wrestling, right?
Yeah.
Marab versus O'Malley was not quite as interesting to watch. It just is what it is, but still a path to a win and a professional sports championship.
Exactly when you are fighting for these high stakes. I mean, Anderson in Chael Sonnen 1 was not a super entertaining fight in the sense that it was action packed, but it was a underdog wrestler controlling the greatest middleweight that we've ever seen, and because it was round after round of unexpected wrestling dominance, it was amazing. And I'm sorry, like I love mixed martial arts. It is just that, mixed martial arts.
Yeah,
Yeah, and
dude.
it is what it is. I think a lot of people in this Bautista and Aldo decision, unfortunately, are kind of leading with their heart a little bit. I mean, the King of Rio, like you said, no one expected him to be, where he's at in his career after, he got inducted in the Hall of Fame and walked away from the sport. Anytime Jose Aldo steps foot in the octagon, I'm pulling for him, even if I don't want to. It's just he's one of the greatest to ever do it.
Well, and I will say, right, whether it's Mario Bautista or Joaquin Buckley, right, both with an 11 by their name, right, facing Jose Aldo was ranked 10th, Stephen Thompson 9th, right? These guys are both, to me, on more of a championship trajectory than Jose Aldo and Stephen Thompson, right? Yeah. And so for me, I'm glad to see them sort of emerge victorious because it really is like a 2-year setback for any type of championship run when you have a loss like that. So I certainly am happy with the result. That's another one. Joaquin Buckley, impressive, man. Undefeated at welterweight. This kid's going to be honestly, other than the champion Bilal Muhammad, I think Joaquin Buckley gives problems to most of these guys.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the thing too. They were talking about it on the broadcast. Wonder Boy is still very much a problem. He's aged gracefully. He's 100% a tough out for anyone standing in his way. And Buckley, he's we're looking at the Kasunganai, highlight reel. I feel like Buckley, unfortunately, has had a lot of pressure put on him to have these crazy sort of stoppages because of what he's done early in his career. And sometimes I think that can be an extraordinary amount of pressure to where maybe you can't help but underperform. He was patient tonight. He did what he needed to do. He got that late stoppage. And granted, it's over a Stephen Thompson who's a bit longer in the tooth, but I don't think that should take away anything from what he did tonight in getting the stoppage victory.
Totally agree. I thought Wonder Boy looked great. And I think with Buckley, right, there were certain spots with the wrestling where I think it made some sense. And then Forrest Griffin made some good points about him sort of having some opportunities on the feet and being able to capitalize where the wrestling really wasn't able to do much sort of once it got down there. But I'm really impressed with him. And I think while I love him on the microphone and I love him sort of his personality, I think he's really very mentally forged inside the octagon. And I think, I don't know how much he loves wrestling. You know what I mean? I think he'd rather be on the feet, but I just think he's getting smarter and smarter. And you see fighters oftentimes, I can't tell you how often I'm watching fights with Bilal Muhammad and he's just like telling me what a guy should do and they don't do it. You know what I mean? Right. And if they did that, they'd be in a great spot. So to me, I thought there was a lot of really high level mental mixed martial arts tonight that got a lot of hands raised and maybe didn't lead to the most exciting finishes all night.
Right. And I jokingly said this off the air with you before we started, Utah, more like Bootah, because the Boo Birds were out in abundance tonight. And they were actually having some influence on some of the prelims. Referees were getting in there a little bit early on restarts when guys were clinched up against the fence. And, again, I understand that you want action. This is the most exciting sport in the world. And, the crowd, they pay for their tickets. They have a voice. They're allowed to use it. But it was troublesome to me tonight to see some of the local referees maybe playing favor to the fans when things slowed down a little bit.
Yeah, and, the MMA fans sometimes, it's like Carla Esparza, who's retiring.
Yeah.
My brother said on the broadcast, like, how about the love for Carla? Like, appreciate the love for her. Hearing Tisha Pennington get booed like that was just kind of odd. But, it's to your point, right? The latter part of the fight. It's like what's left, what taste is left in your mouth at the very end. And it oftentimes just doesn't tell the story.
No, absolutely. But, I don't know. It was a good night of fights. It was definitely everything you wanted it to be. And Alex Pineda able to, further his championship legacy. And, man, I'm with you. Like, this is a night where I just can't probably calm down and sleep. There's too many things running through my mind, storylines and narratives, and Poatan does it again, man. It's just crazy. Over 10 fights in the UFC. I don't think anybody's had a career like his.
Dude, just unbelievable. And also, too, it's always a treat when you get a finish and you get a lot of juice before it, right? You get 3-4 rounds of great fight, like Roundtree, right? It's not just, the Yuri Prochazka, it's a quick fight, right? You know what I mean? So I like when you get a little meat on the bone and you get the finish.
Yeah.
It doesn't just fade into rounds 4 and 5 because both guys are just too cooked,
Yeah.
So
100%. How old is Poatan now? Do you know?
37.
So
I believe.
I like his activity because, no matter what, he's on the backside of his career. He's on the backside of his combat sports career time-wise when he came to the UFC. I think you got to keep up this activity if you want to, maximize your money-making potential.
I agree, but, the cliche of age is just a number. But I really think the MMA age is kind of funky, right? Jose Aldo, 38. Right. Okay.
Right.
How many more miles on him? Right.
Right.
Now, this is the example I always use. Bilal Muhammad just turned 36. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And what is the MMA prime, right? In your mid 30s or whatever it is, right? So I think Bilal is still ascending, right? Perhaps. And a guy like Vicente Luque, and I have mad respect for Luque, but Luque I think is 32 years old, right? Is Luque still ascending? I don't know. You know what I mean? So I do think age sometimes, Wonderboy Thompson at 41 to me doesn't look 41. So
Right.
I think there's a lot of different things. Well, maybe, and I said earlier tonight, he sort of looked at when he got finished, but I don't know, man. I think it depends. I think Poatan, he has mileage in other sports, but I think he could do this for quite a while if he's a little bit less active.
Yeah, it's possible. I definitely think that this is probably going to be his most busy year. I don't think he can stay on this pace to where he has as many fights next year as he did this year. But I don't know. And that's the thing, too. Like, with the benefit of hindsight, we're always looking back at you made a mistake. What have you done for me lately? Like, the minute that he loses, if he does lose, they're going to say it was the activity if he stays this busy, right? Like, it's unfortunately when everything's great, you're doing wonderful. You got the fans supporting you, but you take one misstep and then everyone starts second guessing everything. And, I don't know. Can't please everybody.
Yeah.
But, all right. Any other closing thoughts here, Mr. Anik, before we get you out of here?
No, just really blown away. Appreciate all the love at Fight Pass. We love being with all you boys watching these fights. A lot of fun. And I'm typically at these pay-per-views. So sometimes nice to watch them from home, but I really enjoyed myself tonight, you can be sure. And I do think with a lot of these close decisions, and I don't love talking about scorecards, I do think by and large, save Raquel Pennington, I think most of those decisions sort of did go to the rightful winner.
Yeah. We mentioned the Bautista and Aldo split decision. 18 media scorecards were turned in. Guess what the scores were? Guess who got what?
Jeez, man. Is that one closer to 50-50 or no? What?
It's
16?
It's 50-50. 9-9.
I thought so.
Yeah. And that told you everything you needed to know. And
exactly.
And the loud ones, the more outspoken fans, I think, that are, crying for Aldo getting robbed, it's more from their heart than, maybe their
or their bank account. They have money. All these people, right? It's like, when you're rooting for someone with your dollars, it's different.
Yeah, no, 100%. This is fun, Jason. Hopefully we get to do this again. We got more exciting fight cards coming up, pay-per-views. Abu Dhabi's coming up, Madison Square Garden. Mentioned Jones and Miocic. Hopefully it stays together and everything's good and you didn't jinx it here tonight.
Oh, no. Well, we still got Chandler Oliveira on that card, right?
Oh, if it does fall by the wayside, that's still a fine stacked card, but I'm still going to blame you if something goes pear-shaped.
That's fine. I'll take it.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate your time. And congrats to your brother, by the way. 100 straight pay-per-views. That's a big deal.
Thank you, man. Appreciate that. Yeah, 100 straight. He filled in back in the day, so it wasn't his first one wasn't 100 ago. But yeah, he takes a lot of pride in showing up and keeping that seat warm for as long as they'll have him. So thank you, man. It means a lot.
All right, man. Well, you have a good night, and I'm sure I'll be chatting with you soon.
Always, brother. Much love. Appreciate you all.
Thank you. He is Jason Anik. This is Extra Rounds here on UFC Fight Pass. If you missed any part of it, you can go check it out. We're going to be archived, available for you on YouTube and, of course, Fight Pass proper. It's the biggest no-brainer in all of combat sports. Want to thank our friends over at DraftKings Sportsbook. Make sure you head over to DraftKings and show your love. Sign up, get in on all of the betting action, as DraftKings is the official sports betting partner of the UFC. The crown is yours. Coming up next week, if you are a fan of grappling, I know we talked a little bit about it tonight, maybe fans in Utah aren't fans of grappling, but the world's premier grappling promotion is back on Fight Pass next week. It is UFC Fight Pass Invitational number 8. Nicky Rod, an absolute stud. He's back in action in the main event. He takes on Michael Pixley. It all goes down next Thursday, October 10th, the UFC Fight Pass Invitational exclusively on UFC Fight Pass. I will be out there along with BMAC, Brandon McCatherine on the call. It's going to be an absolutely fun time. If you are not a member of UFC Fight Pass, go sign up right now. Scan the QR code right there on your screen. Get a deal for a year worth of access to the biggest no-brainer in all of combat sports. You'll get to see that UFC Fight Pass Invitational coming up on Thursday. Plus, you get access to the world's largest combat sports library. Every UFC event over the years, Pride, Strikeforce, WEC, and so many more, as well as live event partners like CFFC, Fury FC, which is in action tomorrow in Houston. Sign up right now. It's the biggest no-brainer in all of combat sports. All right, that does it for us. Appreciate you tuning in. And, like I said, I'll be on the ground for the UFC Fight Pass Invitational coming up this week. Of course, keep it locked for all of your coverage coming out of Las Vegas. And we got a fight night coming up next Saturday night as well in the Apex. Thanks for staying up late. Thanks for joining us. For Jason Anik, I'm TJ DeSantis. We'll see you next time right here on Extra Rounds from UFC Fight Pass. Have a good night, everybody.
Events, cage, warriors that elevate,